They say you never forget the sound of your planet dying. It's not a scream, not a bang. It's quieter than you'd think, like the final heartbeat of something ancient and proud, thudding one last time before silence swallows it whole. I remember standing on the roof of an old military hospital in Kuala Hex, one of the last functional cities on Earth, when it began. I was 29, a soldier, a medic, a nobody. The sky cracked open like glass under pressure. A sickly red glow seeped through, casting long shadows that made the buildings look like they were melting. Above us, the Zenith fleet poured through, a swarm of black, angular constructs, each the size of a mountain, hovering like vultures over a corpse not yet cold. I had no idea what they were then. Just another alien species, I thought. Another damn faction wanting to carve out a piece of Earth like a fresh steak. We'd fought before, Soren pirates, Grellan mercenaries, rogue AI warbands from the Martian rebellions. But the Zenith? They didn't negotiate, didn't send diplomats. They sent death. The first salvo hit Hong Kong. I watched it live through the hospital's HUD feed. One moment, a vibrant city. The next, a molten crater. No warning, no demand, just instant erasure. By the time the feed cut to static, we knew Earth was under extermination. I ran back inside, past crumbling ceilings, past patients groaning in their cots, past terrified nurses trying to hold it all together. I remember one woman, Reyes, standing frozen in the hallway. Her hands were covered in someone else's blood. She looked at me like a child would look at a burning house. "What do we do?" she whispered. I didn't have an answer. I told her to keep triage running, told her to keep the wounded calm, told her whatever bullshit I could think of to keep the fear at bay. Then I headed to the emergency armory. I wasn't a hero, not then. I was just angry. Angry at the skies, angry at the universe, angry that the human race, after clawing its way through extinction and despair for thousands of years, was going to end not with a bang, but a surgical, calculated purge. By the time I suited up, the city's defense grid had activated. Automated railguns on the rooftops fired at the invaders, but their shots passed through the Zenith ships like pebbles through fog. I saw drones descending, sleek, oval-shaped things that emitted a sound I'll never forget. Not a hum, not a whine. It was more organic, like a breathing thing pretending to be metal. They didn't just shoot. They disassembled you. I watched my friend Jax get caught by one. He fired at it 4, 5 shots, and then it pulsed, just once. A shimmer, a flicker of energy, and Jax came apart. His body unraveled into dust. No blood, no screams, just a man turned into red mist. I fired my entire magazine into that thing. Don't know if it died. Don't care. I kept moving. Within the hour, half the city was gone. The hospital collapsed behind me as I ran. The ground cracked. Fires rose. Skyscrapers toppled in slow, majestic horror. Our comms failed. Satellite uplinks were gone. Global command had gone dark. All that remained were small units, like mine, fighting a war we couldn't win, just for the satisfaction of dying on our feet. But somewhere around midnight, amidst the ash and the screams, we scored a win. A minor one. A glitch in their system. One of the Zenith drones crashed after a railgun strike overloaded its cloak. Its core was still glowing, pulsing. We dragged it back into the ruins of an underground tunnel, where the last survivors of the Kuala Hex Defense Forces had holed up. About 40 of us, mostly medics, engineers, a few Marines. We pried the drone open like cavemen cracking a skull. Inside, we found something unexpected. Not circuitry, not a reactor, not anything we understood. It looked biological. Fibers moved like muscle. Light pulsed like blood through veins. It was alive, or at least partially. One of the engineers, Ruka, whispered, "It's grown, not built." And in that moment, something shifted in me. They weren't just invaders. They weren't here to conquer. They were harvesting, processing. We weren't enemies to the Zenith. We were raw material. I wanted to vomit. I wanted to scream. But all I did was stare at the red pulse of that drone's core and feel something inside me ignite. Not fear. Resolve. We had maybe a dozen working weapons left between us. 2 missile tubes. A scrambler. 1 ancient Earth Federation plasma cannon someone had salvaged from the Lunar Wars. It wasn't enough. Not really. But we had fire. We had hate. We set up an ambush in the subway tunnels. Lured one of their harvest drones in with heat signatures. When it entered, we detonated every explosive we had. Took out 5 of us in the blast. But the drone died. Real death. Gone. Metal liquefied. Core melted. That was our first victory. Word spread through the surviving units, underground nodes, and mesh nets. Zenith drones can be killed. It wasn't much, but it was enough. That night, I stopped being a medic. I became something else. They started calling me Reckoner after that. I don't remember who said it first. Maybe Ruka, maybe Reyes. But it stuck. I liked it. It made me feel like I had purpose again. I led 10 survivors out of Kuala Hex 2 days later. We moved through forests turned to ash, across rivers boiling with toxic rain. We scavenged weapons from fallen squads, armor from dead soldiers, tech from the enemy when we could get close enough. Every fight was a coin toss. Most of the time, we lost. But sometimes we won. We weren't just fighting for Earth anymore. Earth was gone. Its crust shattered. Its skies poisoned. Its oceans ignited. We were fighting for memory, for rage, for the right to die human. I remember our last night on Earth. We had reached the edge of the Exoport launch ring, hoping to find a functioning ship. The place was a graveyard, burned husks of spacecraft, mountains of slag, and the hollowed-out shell of what was once our gateway to the stars. But one freighter remained, half-fueled, scarred, still breathing. We prepped it under the cover of storm clouds. Reyes, who had once delivered babies in a village outside Bogota, became our pilot. Ruka rewired the engine bypass with nothing but melted cable and prayer. I stood at the edge of the launch deck, looking out at the ruins. No birds, no wind, just fire and silence. That's when the Zenith showed up. 2 of them, not drones this time. Soldiers, tall, too tall, 7 feet, maybe 8. Armor like flowing obsidian. Faces hidden behind masks that moved, pulsed, as if alive. They didn't speak. They just appeared, like God stepping down to erase the last vermin. I fired first. I knew it wouldn't kill them. I just wanted to make a statement. They moved faster than thought. One slammed me through a wall. My ribs snapped like twigs. The other raised its hand, and Reyes screamed as she clutched her skull, blood leaking from her nose, her ears. I grabbed a fusion grenade from my belt, armed it, then shoved it into the bastard's chest. It didn't explode immediately, just hissed, bright and blue and angry. I ran, limped, crawled, whatever I could do to get to the freighter. Behind me, a sun bloomed. The explosion knocked me forward into the ship. Reyes was barely conscious, blood painting her face like war paint. We launched. We didn't cheer. We didn't cry. We just watched as Earth shrank behind us. A smoking ruin, a corpse in orbit. The Zenith didn't chase us, not right away. Maybe they thought we weren't worth the effort. Maybe they were wrong, because that freighter, it wasn't just a way out. It was the beginning. The last Legion was born in that ship, in the blood, in the fury, in the silence of everything we'd lost. We were ghosts, survivors, monsters, heroes, all wrapped into one. They destroyed our home, but in doing so, they gave us something stronger than fear. They gave us purpose. They thought Earth was dead. They didn't know Earth had teeth. The freighter's engines hummed low, a ragged lullaby that never quite drowned out the roar inside my head. I sat slumped in the pilot's cabin, clutching a chipped mug of synth coffee, bitter and weak, like everything else these days. Reyes was at the controls, eyes sharp despite the bruises blooming across her face. The rest of us were packed into the cargo hold, a skeleton crew of survivors clutching scavenged weapons, ghost stories, and half-finished dreams. We'd left Earth behind, but that didn't mean the war was over. If anything, it was just beginning. The last Legion wasn't a name we chose lightly. It was a promise. We were the last line of resistance against the Zenith Accord's cold, methodical purge. A warband stitched together from the ash of a dead planet, fueled by anger and the stubborn spark of humanity. I was their reckoner, part soldier, part medic, part nightmare. The question that kept me awake wasn't how to survive. It was how to fight back, learning to fight. We drifted for weeks, patched together in that battered freighter, eking out supplies from wrecks and ambushes on Zenith supply lines. Every day was a gamble, every skirmish a roll of the dice. But we learned fast. Jax's death haunted me like a ghost. I remembered how the drone had unraveled him, how helpless we'd been. That memory forged me into something sharper, faster, more ruthless. If I was going to lead these broken souls, I had to become the storm that tore through the Zenith's calm. We trained where we could. I taught the engineers how to fight with what little we had. Reyes drilled us on evasive piloting maneuvers. Ruka cobbled together weapons from scraps, rail guns made from scavenged parts, plasma cutters sharpened for combat. We were nothing like the sleek armies the Zenith fielded. We were ragged, desperate, but we were human, and that made us dangerous. The first strike, our first victory, came in the dark between two stars. A Zenith fuel convoy was headed toward one of their forward outposts, a slow, lumbering beast carrying enough fuel to power a dozen warships. We ambushed it in a debris field near the Ganymede Belt. The convoy was heavily guarded, but we had something they didn't: knowledge of the terrain, desperation, and a will to die fighting. The ambush was brutal. I was in the lead gunner's seat of our stolen attack shuttle, heart hammering as I fired shot after shot into the convoy's escort ships. Reyes navigated through the wreckage, dodging missiles and plasma bursts with a pilot's grace born of 1,000 near-death escapes. Behind us, the last Legion's fighters struck like shadows, fast, precise, unforgiving. We tore the convoy apart. Fuel tanks exploded in fiery blossoms. Enemy ships fell in spirals of smoke and sparks. But it wasn't enough. The Zenith retaliated immediately. The Reckoning. They sent hunters after us, sleek black ships that moved like living shadows. Their weapons were precise, their tactics brutal. They hunted us down relentlessly. I remember one fight near the asteroid belt of a forgotten system called Vesta. Our shuttle was hit, the cockpit filled with smoke. My vision blurred. I crashed onto a rocky moon, shards of metal piercing my armor. I dragged myself out, bleeding, gasping for breath. And then I saw it. A Zenith soldier. Tall, silent, masked. Slowly, it stepped toward me. I raised my rifle, fired 3 times. The bullets bounced off its armor. It lifted its hand. I saw the shimmer of energy pulse through the air, a pulse that would have shattered bone and stopped hearts. But before it could hit, Ruka appeared from the shadows, blasting the soldier with a plasma torch. The creature screamed, a sound like metal grinding against bone. We ran. That night, as we hid beneath a crater's lip, Reyes cleaned my wounds. "You're stubborn," she said, her voice rough. I smiled, even though I felt like dying. "So are they, but so are we." Brotherhood in the ashes. Days turned into weeks. We moved from system to system, always hunted, always hunted. We lost good people. Reyes' sister lost to a drone strike. Ruka's partner vaporized in an ambush. But we held together, because that was what humanity did. We fought, we bled, we lived for one another. And I learned something important. It wasn't enough to hate the Zenith. To beat them, we had to be smarter, stronger, better. The shadow of the Gabane. Then came the rumors. Whispers in the galactic underground about a weapon, an old Earth secret called Project Godbane. A weapon so powerful, it could cripple a Zenith dreadnought with a single blast. The idea sounded like a myth, like a fairy tale meant to keep us hopeful. But hope was the only currency left to us. I set a course for Titan's Shadow Moon, where, according to the whispers, the weapon was buried in a forgotten black site. Reyes looked at me, eyes fierce. "If this is a suicide mission," she said, "I'm going with you." I nodded. Wouldn't have it any other way. The edge of humanity. As we prepared, I thought about everything we had lost. The cities, the skies, the people. Earth was gone, but the fire still burned inside us. The fire that had built this war band from dust and rust. The Zenith thought they could erase us. They thought wrong. We were no longer just survivors. We were warriors. And soon, we would show them exactly what humanity was capable of. That was the day the Reckoner was born. The Titan system wasn't just a waypoint. It was a crucible, a place where stars seemed to grind against one another, and where the ghosts of Earth's forgotten sins lay buried beneath layers of ice and shadow. I hadn't slept in days, maybe weeks. When you're running for your life, sleep becomes a luxury, a weakness you can't afford. Reyes piloted the freighter with mechanical precision, eyes scanning every blip on the sensors, every flicker on the comms. "Almost there," she said, voice low, tight. The ship hummed under us like a wounded beast. The damage from our last fight was still fresh. Every creak and groan made me flinch. We'd tracked the coordinates of the Godbane black site through a tangled web of rumors, intercepted transmissions, and sheer dumb luck. Earth's last hope, an ancient weapon built in secrecy during the final days of the Federation, designed to wipe out entire fleets. If it was real, it could turn the tide against the Zenith. If it wasn't, well, then we were walking into a trap. As we dropped out of hyperspace, the view screen flickered to reveal Titan's Shadow Moon, a jagged ball of ice and rock hanging in the cold void. No atmosphere, no life, only silence. I tightened my grip on the armrest. "Reyes, status? Landing protocols are nominal. Scanners show a subterranean structure beneath the southern ice plains. Coordinates match the black side's last known position. Good. Let's hope it's still there. Into the frozen depths. We suited up quickly. Our armor was a patchwork of salvage tech and jury-rigged enhancements. Light enough to move fast, but heavy enough to keep bullets out. I felt every scar, every dent in my gear like a badge of honor. We descended through the thin atmosphere in a dropship, the cold biting through the layers of insulation. Outside the viewport, the icy plain stretched endlessly, cracked and pocked with crevices that seemed to whisper threats. The landing was rough. The ship's hull shuddered against the ice. As the ramp lowered, a rush of frigid air hit us. Reyes was first out, scanning the horizon with a compact rifle slung across her back. We moved as a unit. The last Legion skeleton crew spread out in tight formation. Ruka, our engineer, carried a portable scanner, the only thing that gave us hope of finding the black site beneath the frozen wasteland. The terrain was brutal, slippery ice fields that shattered underfoot, sharp cliffs, and the eerie silence of a dead world. The only sound was our breath and the crunch of boots on ice. The black site. Hours later, Ruka's scanner beeped frantically. Got something. A jagged fissure in the ice opened like a wound. Below it, a metallic structure glinted, a partially buried facility, half frozen in time. The black site. We climbed down carefully, rappelling into the darkness. The air inside was stale, heavy with the scent of rust and old machinery. The walls were lined with faded warning signs and strange symbols, remnants of a time when we still believed we could control the monsters we'd unleashed. The corridor led to a massive chamber dominated by a dormant war machine, the Gabane. It was colossal, a towering fusion of metal and circuitry built not just for destruction but for annihilation. Its surface was etched with battle scars and faded insignia from a long-dead Earth military. Ruka's fingers flew over her scanner. The core's intact, but the power cells are offline. I ran my hand along the cold metal. Can you power it up? She shook her head. Not with what we have. It needs a reactor source, a fusion core. The unexpected guests. Before we could react, the ground trembled. Alarms blared through the black site speakers. The ice above us cracked. Zenith soldiers, more than a dozen, dropped from the fissure, landing with the grace of predators. They didn't waste time. The air filled with the sharp snap of plasma bolts and the heavy thud of railgun fire. We scattered, diving behind consoles and metal pillars. Reyes laid down covering fire, her shots precise and deadly. I fought side by side with Ruka, who wielded a plasma cutter like a butcher's cleaver. We were outnumbered, but the black site's corridors gave us an edge. Narrow halls and low ceilings prevented the Zenith from using their heavy weapons effectively. The firefight was brutal and relentless. I felt a burning in my side, bullet graze. I hoped. The cold ice beneath us was stained with blood and oil. Amidst the chaos, I saw Reyes fall, hit by a plasma blast that sent her crashing into a wall. I sprinted to her side, dragging her behind cover. Stay with me, I growled. Her eyes fluttered open, fierce despite the pain. We can't let them take the Godbane. I nodded. We won't. Sacrifice and resolve. The fight dragged on. Ruka managed to rig a temporary power line to the Godbane's core, but it wasn't enough to bring the weapon online. We made a desperate decision. To save the Godbane, someone had to hold the Zenith off long enough for the rest of us to escape with what we could carry. Ruka volunteered. No, I said, but she shook her head. It's the only way. I can buy you time. With a fierce smile, she charged, detonating a plasma grenade that rocked the chamber. The blast took out half the attackers, but she was caught in the fallout. I felt rage like a wildfire, burning away any fear. Move, I shouted, dragging Reyes as we fled into the freezing darkness. The aftermath. Back on the freighter, Reyes and I tended to our wounds. Ruka's sacrifice weighed heavily on us all. She had saved our lives and the weapon that could turn the tide. The Godbane was more than a weapon. It was a symbol, a reminder that even in the darkest times, humanity could rise. As we charted our next move, I looked out at the cold stars. The war was far from over, but for the first time, we had a chance. The silence inside the freighter was suffocating. The hum of the engines, usually a comforting drone, felt more like a death knell. Reyes lay pale and silent in the medical bay, her breathing shallow but steady. I kept checking the wound on my side, fingers sticky with dried blood, a dull ache reminding me that survival wasn't without cost. Ruka's sacrifice echoed in my mind, that wild plasma blast, the defiant grin before she vanished into the flames. She bought us time, yes, but the price was steep. I'd never seen anyone throw themselves into fire like that. So willingly, so fiercely. I was angry, I was tired, but most of all, I was scared. Scared of losing what little we had left. The burden of leadership. The freighter felt smaller now, more cramped. We carried more than wounded bodies and weapons. We carried the weight of a fragile hope, and that was heavier than any armor. Reyes was stable but unconscious. The medtechs worked in shifts, but the strain was clear in their eyes. There wasn't enough medicine or clean water for a long stay here. We needed a safe haven, and fast. I took a deep breath and ran my hand through my hair, pacing the narrow hallway. The crew looked to me for answers. I was supposed to be the reckoner, the leader who stood unbroken. But inside, I was unraveling. Farhan, Ruka's voice echoed in my head. Lead them like fire, bright and unyielding. I clenched my fists. She was right. I had to be that fire. The hunt begins. Our brief moment of victory had stirred a hornet's nest. The zenith would come for us. More ships, more soldiers, more death. We couldn't stay in one place. Not if we wanted to live. The God Bane was still offline, dormant in that black site beneath Titan's icy crust. We had a sliver of hope, but to wield it, we needed a power source, a fusion core buried deep within a derelict Federation battleship lost in the Proxima sector. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot. I called a meeting in the cramped briefing room. Reyes was still out, but I had to make decisions. We move fast, I said, voice steady despite the storm inside. Proxima's dangerous territory, pirates, zenith patrols, rogue AI. But the battleship is our best chance. We retrieve the fusion core, power up Gabane, and strike back. The crew nodded, resolve hardening. I saw it in their eyes, fear wrapped in determination. We were no longer just fighting to survive. We were fighting to win. Ghosts of the past. The journey to Proxima was a tense blur of hyperspace jumps and tense vigilance. The sector was a graveyard of forgotten battles, rusting wrecks, shattered stations, and the detritus of a galactic war that had never truly ended. The Federation battleship was a ghost from another age, a colossal relic named USS Vindicator, lost during the Federation's final stand against the Zenith decades ago. Legends said it carried the experimental fusion core that powered Earth's last generation of weapons. When we dropped out of hyperspace, the Vindicator loomed ahead like a dead god, its hull scarred, half buried in asteroid debris. I felt a chill, not just from the void outside, but from the weight of history. Boarding the Vindicator, we suited up again, weapons ready, hearts pounding. The airlock was jammed, requiring Ruka's expert hands to jury-rig a bypass. We slipped inside like shadows, navigating narrow corridors choked with dust, flickering lights, and the ghosts of a crew long gone. The ship was a labyrinth of silence and danger. Systems flickered unpredictably. Security drones lurked in shadows, activated by our presence. I moved ahead cautiously, heart hammering with every step. Then we found the carnage, signs of a final, desperate battle. Burned-out corridors, empty quarters strewn with personal effects, and deep gouges from plasma blasts. It was a tomb, and we were intruders. The core chamber. After hours of searching, we reached the engineering bay. The fusion core sat at the center, massive and humming faintly with residual power, encased in reinforced containment. I could almost feel its heartbeat, but we weren't alone. A patrol of Zenith soldiers, cold and efficient, appeared through the corridors. Our presence was no secret. The firefight erupted instantly, blaster fire and explosions echoing through the metal halls. I ducked behind a bulkhead, returning fire, feeling the adrenaline sharpen every sense. Reyes fought beside me, still weak but relentless. We moved as one, covering each other, our ragtag band pushing deeper into the ship. The cost of victory. We grabbed the fusion core, attaching it to our portable power rig. But as we prepared to leave, a collapse blocked our exit. The ship's systems were failing self-destruct sequences triggered by our intrusion. The walls shook violently. Dust and debris rained down. We had minutes, maybe less. Reyes shouted orders. We raced through failing corridors, dodging fire and falling metal. I carried the fusion core, feeling its weight as it tethered to hope. Behind us, the Vindicator groaned, ready to die in a final, fiery collapse. We made it out just as the ship erupted in flames. Returning to the fire, back on the freighter, The fusion core hummed with raw energy. Ruka's tech magic brought it online, feeding power into the Godbane's dormant heart. I watched as systems flickered and roared to life, the ancient weapon awakening from its icy slumber. It was a moment suspended between hope and dread. We weren't just survivors anymore. We were the last spark against an endless night. The reckoning ahead. The battle was far from over. The Zenith would come for us, their forces growing by the day. But now, armed with the God Bane and the fire of a desperate people, we had a chance. I looked out into the star-streaked void, feeling the weight of the war pressing down. But inside me burned a new truth. Humanity never breaks. We fight. We endure. We burn. The cold glow of the Godbane systems pulsed steadily in the dim hangar bay. It was alive, a sleeping titan awakened after decades of silence, its metal skin gleaming under flickering lights. Watching it come to life, I felt something I hadn't dared admit in a long time. Hope. Not the kind of naive hope that dreams without grounding, but the hard, biting kind born of fire and blood. Yet, hope came at a cost. The Zenith had eyes everywhere. Their reach was long, and our survival depended on more than just a weapon. We needed allies. We needed a rebellion. The spark ignites. Reyes was awake, patched up but still weak. Her eyes, though tired, burned with determination. "We can't hold out here," she said quietly, sitting up in the med bay. "The Zenith will swarm us the moment they catch wind of Godbane." I nodded. "We need to find others, survivors, fighters, those still willing to stand. We need a spark to ignite the rebellion." Her gaze hardened. "Then we better find that spark fast." A call through the stars. Our communications array was ancient but functional, a relic like much of our gear. I tapped into the encrypted channels, broadcasting a message across the Outer Rim territories. "To any who hear this, the Reckoner calls. The Godbane awakens. Join us or fall beneath the Zenith's shadow." Freedom is not lost. It wasn't just a call to arms. It was a declaration, a beacon for anyone still fighting in the dark. Minutes felt like hours as we waited for a response. Shadows on the horizon. Responses came, faint at first, garbled transmissions from scattered pockets of resistance. Pirates, mercenaries, ex-Federation soldiers, and civilians fed up with Zenith tyranny. They were as fractured as we were, but the message was clear. The fight wasn't over. Then came a sharp alert on the scanners. Incoming Zenith vessels. Patrols had tracked our signal and were closing fast. The freighter's alarms blared. The crew scrambled. Reyes and I readied ourselves. "We hold the line here," I said, voice calm but fierce. "We fight for every second we can buy." Battle in the void. The first salvo hit like thunder, plasma bolts searing through the blackness, ripping into the freighter's shields. The ship shuddered violently. I strapped myself into the gunner's turret, fingers dancing over controls as I aimed at the incoming fighters. Reyes took the command deck, coordinating evasive maneuvers. The battle was chaos. Tracer fire streaked past, explosions lit the void, and the acrid scent of burning circuitry filled the air. Despite the odds, our crew fought with desperation and skill, each shot a prayer, each dodge a dance with death, rallying the broken. After hours of relentless combat, the Zenith ships withdrew, but the message was clear. The war was no longer a secret. We had to move quickly. Reyes called a council meeting. The crew was exhausted, but determination burned in their eyes. "We can't just survive," she said. "We need to fight back, not just with Godbane, but with every weapon, every ally we can find." I looked around the room, faces scarred, worn, but unbroken. "It's time to become more than survivors," I said. "It's time to become a rebellion." Finding the spark. Our next step was to contact the Crimson Coalition, a loose alliance of rebels operating out of the asteroid belt around Arcturus IV. Rumors said they had fighters, weapons, and a network deep within Zenith-controlled space. Reaching them was dangerous. Their communications were heavily encrypted, and Zenith forces prowled the belt like sharks. But if anyone could help us, it was them. Into the belt, we plotted a course for Arcturus IV, navigating through asteroid fields that felt like flying through a storm of jagged knives. Every creak and groan of the freighter reminded me how fragile we were. But we had the Godbane now, and that was a game changer. Still, it wasn't just the Zenith we had to fear. Pirate bands and mercenaries lurked in the shadows, ready to prey on any ship showing weakness. Our crew's nerves were taut as the ship weaved through space debris, every sensor scanning for threats. The Crimson Coalition. When we finally made contact, it was through a pulse of encrypted signals, sharp, clipped messages exchanged in code. The leader was a woman named Kayla, fierce and sharp-eyed. Her reputation whispered in every rebel camp. She agreed to meet, but only if we came to her base on the asteroid fortress known as Red Bastion. The fortress was a relic of war itself, heavily fortified, built into the crimson rock, its walls bristling with turrets and sensors. Trial by fire. Landing on Red Bastion was like stepping into another war zone. We were strangers, outsiders, and trust was a currency earned in blood. Kayla met us personally, her gaze assessing and unyielding. "We don't take kindly to strangers waving ancient weapons," she said bluntly. "Why should we trust you?" I met her eyes. "Because the Godbane is real. Because the Zenith's grip tightens every day. Because we need each other." She paused, then nodded slowly. "You've got fire. Let's see if it burns long enough." A new alliance. The talks were tense, but alliances began to form. The coalition had fighters, ships, and resources, but no Godbane. We had Godbane, but needed fighters. Together, we planned the first strike, a coordinated assault on a Zenith supply depot in the Outer Rim. It was risky, but a necessary step to prove our strength. As plans took shape, I felt the weight of responsibility settle firmly on my shoulders. This was no longer a desperate fight for survival. It was a war for freedom, preparing for war. Back on the freighter, the crew buzzed with renewed energy. Repairs and upgrades began immediately. Weapon systems were enhanced, armor reinforced, and battle drills intensified. I spent hours in the simulator, running scenarios with Reyes and the pilots. Every moment sharpened our edge. But beneath it all, I kept returning to Rook's sacrifice, to the fire she'd ignited in all of us. The rebellion was no longer a dream. It was becoming real, and the fight for humanity's future had truly begun. The tension inside the freighter was electric, a charged storm ready to explode. Every face I saw wore the same mix of determination and fear, the kind that comes when you're about to walk into the jaws of hell, but you have no choice but to fight. The Godbane hummed softly in the cargo bay, a sleeping giant waiting for its moment to awaken. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, cold and indifferent to the fate of a handful of rebels ready to challenge an empire. This wasn't just another battle. It was the first real shot fired in a war we couldn't afford to lose. Dawn before the storm, we gathered in the cramped briefing room, the air thick with anticipation. Kayla paced in front of the holomap of the Outer Rim, her sharp eyes flicking over the target, a Zenith supply depot nestled on a barren asteroid named Kessler 9. "This depot," Kayla said, voice low and steady, "is critical. It's a lifeline for Zenith forces in this sector, weapons, fuel, personnel. Hit it hard, and we send a message that the rebellion is alive." Reyes leaned forward, her arms still in a sling, but her spirit unbroken. "We strike fast, in and out. No drawn-out fights. We use Godbane's power only if absolutely necessary." I nodded, feeling the weight of leadership press on me. Everyone knows their role. Communication is key. We can't afford mistakes. Ghosts of preparation. In the hours leading to the strike, the ship buzzed with final preparations. Weapons were checked, armor suits fitted, and nerves steeled. I spent some time alone, running my hands over the cold metal of the Godbane's core, feeling its latent energy pulse beneath my fingers. Memories flashed, Rook's defiant grin before she vanished into fire, Reyes' quiet strength, the crew's unwavering resolve. They were the reason I had to make this work. The freighter's pilot, Jax, cracked a rare smile. "You ready, Reckoner?" I met his gaze, trying to muster the confidence I felt inside. "Ready as I'll ever be." Into the abyss. The approach to Kessler 9 was tense and silent. We slipped through the asteroid field like shadows, sensors scanning for patrols or traps. The Zenith's presence was heavy, automated turrets glinting in the asteroid's craters, patrol ships orbiting in calculated patterns. Our advantage was speed and surprise. The moment we dropped out of stealth, it would be all guns blazing, breach and clear. I led the boarding team, gear tight, hearts pounding. The airlock hissed open, revealing the cold, steel interior of the depot. Inside, the corridors were sterile and silent, a stark contrast to the chaos we knew would soon erupt. We moved quickly, disabling security systems and planting charges on fuel reserves and ammo caches. Then came the alarms. Firestorm. The depot erupted into chaos. Red lights flashing, klaxons blaring. Zenith soldiers flooded the corridors, weapons blazing. We fought fiercely, each shot echoing off the metal walls. I ducked behind a bulkhead, returning fire, heart racing. The Godbane's energy core was strapped to my back, a constant reminder of what we stood for. As the battle raged, I saw Reyes coordinating the team, her voice steady despite the danger. Turning the tide, we reached the main fuel storage, the key target. With a final set of charges planted, I called for retreat, but the Zenith had cut off our exit. Trapped, we fought our way through, using every ounce of skill and luck. At the last moment, Kayla and her fighters blasted a path, clearing debris and enemy soldiers. We escaped, breathless but victorious. Aftermath and resolve. Back on the freighter, the explosion lit the asteroid's dark surface like a second sun. The message was clear. The rebellion was real, and we were no longer alone. The moment we escaped the burning ruins of Kessler 9, the weight of what we had done finally hit me. It was more than just a strike. It was a statement, a crack in the seemingly invincible Zenith armor. But the victory came at a cost, and as the adrenaline faded, the reality of our losses began to settle in like a cold shadow. After the firestorm, the freighter's corridors were thick with silence, punctuated only by the steady beep of med bays and the low murmur of tired voices. We had lost good people, friends. The ones who'd fought beside us with grit and fire now lay quiet in makeshift memorials, their faces etched into my memory. Reyes was among the wounded, her sling a reminder of the price we paid. But her spirit was unbroken, and that was a beacon in the darkness. I sat alone in the command deck, staring out at the stars. The vast emptiness mocked our fragile triumph, a reminder of how small we were in the grand scheme, yet how fierce our flame had become. Ripples across the void. Our broadcast network buzzed to life. Messages flooding in from scattered outposts, resistance cells, and survivors. The strike on Kessler 9 had ignited something. It was a call to arms, a spark for the oppressed, but it also painted a target on our backs. Zenith forces tightened their grip, dispatching hunters to find and crush us before we could grow stronger. Kayla stood by my side as we reviewed the incoming intel. "The Zenith won't wait," she said grimly. "They'll come at us hard, fast, and without mercy." We had to move fast, rallying the coalition. With the coalition's fighters rallying around us, we set course for the asteroid haven known as Ironforge, a former mining colony turned rebel stronghold deep within a dense nebula. Ironforge was a place of refuge and resilience, where outlaws, miners, and fighters forged a fragile peace against the Zenith's tyranny. But to reach it, we had to navigate through a gauntlet of enemy patrols and deadly cosmic storms. Ghosts in the nebula. The journey through the nebula was harrowing. Electric storms crackled in the void, sending shudders through the hull. Visibility dropped to near zero as dense clouds of charged particles interfered with sensors. It was the kind of environment that swallowed ships whole. We flew by instinct and grit. Jax at the helm, eyes sharp and steady. "Almost there," he muttered, voice tight. The Ironforge Sanctuary. Emerging from the nebula, Ironforge came into view, a sprawling web of metal and light, clinging to a jagged asteroid like a living thing. The colony was rough, scars of its mining past mixed with makeshift defenses and rebel outposts. Welcomed by wary but hopeful faces, we began the work of repair, resupply, and recruitment. Shadows among us. But even in Sanctuary, danger lurked. A whispered warning reached us, a possible Zenith spy embedded deep within the coalition. Paranoia spread like wildfire. Trust was fragile. We tightened security, double-checking every communication and scrutinizing every stranger. Plans and promises. In the council chamber, Kayla, Reyes, and I hammered out the next phase. Our victory at Kessler 9 was only the beginning. We needed to hit harder, strike deeper, and inspire more. A plan was forming coordinated assaults on multiple Zenith supply lines, sabotage, and liberation of captive outposts. It was risky, but it was necessary. The Reckoner's resolve. As night fell over Ironforge, I stood on the observation deck, looking at the stars. The rebellion was no longer a flicker. It was a flame, and I was its keeper. The fight ahead would be brutal, the cost high, but we were ready. Because humanity refused to be broken, the cold metal walls of Ironforge hummed faintly under the weight of countless lives holding their breath. We were no longer just survivors. We had become hunters. But the prey was deadly, and the game had changed forever. The Zenith, furious after the hit on Kessler 9, were hunting us relentlessly. No longer was it about quiet survival. Now, it was about taking the fight to them and making them bleed, preparing the wolves. Inside the dimly lit armory, the air was thick with the smell of gun oil, electronics, and sweat. I ran my hands over the new weapons stacked neatly, admiring how far we'd come since stealing our first blaster from a scavenger's cache. The Godbane's power core was being recalibrated, integrated into our arsenal with a precision born of desperation and genius. It was a game changer, if we could wield it right. Kayla stood beside me, loading an energy rifle with steady fingers. We hit their supply lines, their comms, their fuel depots, she said. Cut off the limbs and they'll bleed out. Her voice was calm, but I caught the spark of fire beneath. The same fire that kept us alive. Reyes limped in, her arm still healing, but her mind sharper than ever. We've got to be ghosts, she added. Move fast, disappear faster. They expect us to hide. Let's make them think twice. The map of shadows. We gathered around the hollow map, the flickering starfield highlighting target after target, zenith convoys, outposts, supply hubs, each one a thread in their vast web. Our first strike after Kessler. 9, I said, tracing a finger over a small, isolated depot on the edge of the barren reach. We'll be here, Depot 47X. Low defenses, but critical fuel supplies. Kayla nodded. We'll hit it before dawn, take what we need, and disappear. Reyes tapped a few commands, bringing up schematics, security rotations, patrol patterns, drone sweeps. We'll use the Godbane's stealth capabilities to get in and out. The room was tense. Every one of us understood the stakes. One slip-up, one mistake, and it could mean death. Into the night, the freighter slipped silently through the dark, using every trick to avoid detection. Jax's hands flew over the controls, piloting us through asteroid belts and radiation storms like a ghost. I felt the familiar hum of the Godbane at my back, a silent promise of destruction, held in check only by will. As we neared Depot 47X, I checked my gear, energy rifle, sidearm, grenades, and the small device that could unleash the Godbane's core in a controlled burst. The boarding hatch opened. It was time. Silent shadows. We landed just outside the depot under the cloak of darkness. The cold night air bit at my skin as we moved like shadows, cutting across the barren ground toward the perimeter. Our comms were whispered, breath shallow. Patrol drones hovered above, their red scanning lights slicing the darkness. We timed our movements carefully, slipping past sensor blind spots. Reyes led the way, hacking into the security grid with a compact terminal. One by one, the drones powered down. The gates slid open with a hiss. The calm before the storm. Inside the depot, the air was stale and mechanical. Rows of fuel tanks gleamed under flickering lights, guarded by a handful of Zenith soldiers. We moved fast, planting charges, disabling communications, grabbing what supplies we could carry. Suddenly, alarms blared. The quiet shattered. Fight or flight? The Zenith soldiers reacted swiftly, weapons drawn and firing. Gunfire echoed through the metal corridors. I ducked behind a crate, returning fire with precision. The Godbane's core pulsed at my back, begging to be unleashed, but I held it in check. This was a surgical strike, not a full war. Reyes covered our flank, her voice calm and commanding over comms. Kayla charged forward, her energy blade cutting through the enemy like lightning. We fought with everything we had, every second a dance between life and death. Extraction under fire. With the charges set, we raced for extraction. Zenith reinforcements were closing fast. Jax's ship hovered just beyond the perimeter, guns blazing to cover our retreat. I felt a sharp pain as a glancing shot grazed my shoulder, but adrenaline pushed me forward. We leapt aboard, the ramp closing just as enemy fire struck the hull. The freighter surged away, engines roaring. Victory and loss. Back in the safety of Ironforge, medics rushed to tend to wounds. The depot exploded behind us, a fiery beacon of our defiance. But the victory was bittersweet. Several of our team had fallen. Their sacrifices were etched deeply into our souls. Kayla's words echoed in my mind. We're making them bleed, but they'll come harder. A new reality. As I sat in the med bay, nursing my wound, I stared at the stars outside the viewport. The hunt had truly begun. The Zenith would not stop, and neither would we, because humanity was no longer just fighting to survive. We were fighting to reclaim our future. The silence inside the freighter was deafening. It wasn't the kind of silence that comforts you, the peaceful quiet after a storm. No, this was the heavy, suffocating silence that comes before a plunge into the unknown. A silence filled with questions we had no answers for. We were about to dive deep into enemy territory, beyond the known, into the heart of Zenith space. It was a suicide mission by any standard, but the kind of desperate gamble that could turn the tide of the war. The briefing. Kayla stood in front of the holomap, her face grim. The cold blue light reflected off her sharp features as she pointed to the blinking red dot deep inside Zenith-held space. "This is our target," she said, voice low but fierce. A data vault hidden in the ruins of an abandoned orbital station, codenamed Abyss. It's rumored to hold intel on Zenith operations, troop movements, weapon caches, even their leadership structure. Reyes folded her arms, skeptical. "Sounds too good to be true. If the Zenith wanted it, they'd guard it like their lives depended on it." "They do," Kayla agreed. "But their forces are stretched thin. We've tracked their patrols, and there's a small window, just a few hours, where the Abyss is vulnerable. We have to move fast and get in and out before they regroup." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of responsibility settle like a stone in my gut. This mission was different, more dangerous, more critical. "If we pull this off," I said, looking around the room, "it'll change everything." The team nodded. There was no room for hesitation. Ghosts of the past. As we prepared, I found myself staring at the old holologs from the station, echoes of a time before the Zenith War, when humanity's reach in space was still young and hopeful. The Abyss had once been a bustling hub for scientific research and diplomacy, now nothing more than a ghostly skeleton drifting in the void. I thought about the sacrifices that had brought us here, the friends we'd lost, the battles fought in darkness. This mission was for them. Into the void. Jax piloted the freighter with a steady hand as we slipped past the outer patrols, cloaked by the thick asteroid belt surrounding the station's remains. The Abyss loomed ahead, a massive ring of twisted metal and shattered solar arrays, drifting like a graveyard in the black. We docked with the station's skeletal docking bay, the airlock groaning as it sealed behind us. The silence inside was oppressive, shadows and threats. The station was a labyrinth of crumbling corridors and flickering lights. Our footsteps echoed as we moved, scanning every corner for signs of patrols or traps. Reyes led the way, her eyes sharp, scanning for anything out of place. Suddenly, the comms crackled. "Movement detected," came the whisper from the sensors. We froze. The Zenith were here. The ambush. The enemy struck fast, a squad of Zenith soldiers materializing from hidden compartments, weapons raised. The firefight erupted in a deafening roar. Shots bounced off rusted bulkheads, sparks flying. I dodged behind a control panel, returning fire, heart pounding. Reyes shouted orders, her voice cutting through the chaos. We fought tooth and nail, every shot a gamble between life and death. Into the core. Despite the ambush, we pushed forward, making our way toward the central vault. The corridors narrowed. The air grew stale and thick with dust. At the vault door, Kayla worked the controls, fingers flying over the ancient keypad. The lock clicked open, revealing rows of data drives and storage units. The revelation. We quickly downloaded the intel onto encrypted drives. The files revealed something chilling. Plans for a new Zenith superweapon, one capable of wiping out entire colonies with a single strike. The scale of the threat was staggering. Escape and pursuit. No sooner had we secured the data than alarms blared again. The Zenith had called reinforcements. We raced back through the station's twisting corridors, Zenith soldiers on our heels. Jax was waiting at the docking bay, engines roaring. We leapt aboard just as the station shook from incoming fire. Aftermath. Back in the freighter's command deck, we pored over the data, our faces pale. The information was a game-changer, proof that the Zenith were planning to escalate the war to catastrophic levels. We knew then that the stakes had risen. A new resolve. As the freighter sped away from the Abyss, I looked out at the endless stars and vowed silently, we would fight harder, bleed more, and never surrender. Because humanity's light refused to be snuffed out. The stars outside the viewport were cold and indifferent, but inside the cramped command deck of the Iron Forge, the heat of battle simmered like a living thing. This was it. The moment everything we had fought for came down to this. We weren't just a ragtag group of rebels anymore. We were the last line between humanity and annihilation. The Zenith superweapon, uncovered in the Abyss mission, was ready to fire, and we had one chance to stop it. The calm before the storm. I sat with my rifle resting against my knee, staring at the blinking lights of the control panels, trying to steady my breathing. Around me, the crew prepared for what could be our final fight. Kayla was running through tactical data, her fingers dancing over the holographic map. She pointed at the enormous Zenith dreadnought that loomed ahead, black and menacing like a cosmic beast. "There," she said quietly, "that's the warship housing the superweapon. We take that out, the threat ends. But it won't be easy." Reyes loaded her sidearm, her eyes fierce. "No, it won't, but we're ready. We've come too far to back down now." Jax leaned against the wall, double-checking the ship's shields and engines. "I'll get us in close. But once we're inside their firing range, it's going to be a brawl." I felt the weight of every sacrifice pressing down on me. The friends lost, the battle scarred into my skin. "This is for them," I whispered, gripping my rifle tighter. Entering the lion's den, we slipped through space like ghosts, the Iron Forge cloaked and silent as we approached the Zenith dreadnought. The ship was a fortress, layers of armor, thrumming with energy, shields shimmering like a storm. Our plan was simple and brutal: board the dreadnought, disable the superweapon's power core, and get out before the entire ship went up in flames. It was a suicide mission in every sense, but there was no other choice. The breach. We stormed the airlock, weapons drawn, and poured into the dreadnought's cavernous interior. The corridors were a maze of steel and light, echoing with the hum of machinery and distant footsteps. Zenith soldiers poured out of every side corridor, weapons blazing. The firefight was immediate and brutal. I dove behind a bulkhead, firing bursts from my rifle. The crackle of energy weapons filled the air. Kayla and Reyes moved like specters, cutting down enemies with deadly precision. Into the heart of darkness, we fought our way deeper into the ship, each step a battle. The superweapons core chamber was a massive vault, glowing with ominous blue energy. Kayla approached the control panel, fingers flying over alien glyphs and commands. "This thing's running on a fusion core," she muttered. "If we can overload it, we might just blow the whole ship." Reyes kept watch, every muscle tense, every sense alert. The sacrifice. Suddenly, the ship shuddered violently in emergency lockdown. Zenith reinforcements poured in, surrounding us. I saw the resolve in Kayla's eyes. This was the moment she'd been ready for. "We hold them off," she said. "You finished the job." I nodded, heart pounding. Overload. I sprinted to the core's control panel, working quickly to override the systems. Alarms blared, red lights flashing. The fusion core began to destabilize, energy spiking dangerously. The countdown started. Final moments. I could hear the battle raging behind me, gunfire and shouts echoing in the distance. The core was moments from meltdown. I triggered the last sequence, and the chamber exploded in a blinding light. The escape. The shockwave threw me across the corridor, pain radiating through my body. I struggled to my feet, racing back to the Iron Forge as the dreadnought began to implode. Jax had the engines primed, shields up. We blasted out of the collapsing wreck just as it shattered into cosmic debris. Aftermath. Floating in the void, watching the Zenith dreadnought disintegrate, a wave of exhaustion and relief washed over me. We had won a victory, not just for ourselves, but for all of humanity. Kayla, Reyes, and the others gathered around, bruised but alive. A new dawn. As the Iron Forge charted a course back to our hidden base, I looked out at the stars once more. The war was far from over, but this battle had proven something vital. That humanity's spirit, no matter how battered, was unbreakable, and that as long as we fought together, there was hope.